Dragonlance. It is my favorite setting by far of all times. It is the setting that got me into Dungeons and Dragons. Ever since a friend of mine handed me Dragons of Autumn Twilight, I have been in this game and I have been loving it. So recently I reviewed a Dragonlance product off the DMs Guild, and this week I want to do yet another one because I just can't get enough Dragonlance. So today we're going to review a book that I am especially excited about, Tasslehoff's Pouches of Everything, the revised version. So let's get into it. Hello everybody, I'm Joe and this is the DM Toolbox, your go-to place to get all the tools you need to enhance your D&D games. Before we get started today, just a quick reminder, if you like my channel, if you like what I'm doing, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, and check the description down below for all my socials and where you can follow me and get some updates on some new stuff I've got coming out real soon. Okay, let's talk about Dragonlance. So, I've always been a big Dragonlance fan. I'm real into the lore of Dragonlance. That is one of the things I really love about it. I haven't really got to play Dragonlance much in 5th edition, but I did play it a lot back in 2nd edition AD&D. And, you know, I find that it's one of those worlds that I have been worried about adapting it to 5th edition. Because it was built in that era of 2nd edition, it felt very custom to those 2nd edition and 1st edition AD&D rules, right? So, some of the modern stuff like sorcerers and warlocks, even things like druids and bards don't always quite fit into the Dragonlance setting well, because at least during the Age of Despair and the War of the Lance, outside of wizards, there wasn't a whole lot of magic, especially holy magic. So even playing a cleric could be tricky. So how do we adapt that to 5th edition? Wizards of the Coast just came out with their version of 5th edition Dragonlance, and it's not bad. I thought that they took some interesting approaches, especially with the way they did feats for the Knights of Solomnia and for the Mages of High Sorcery, how they brought other magic users like bards and sorcerers and warlocks kind of into that fold. But the book does take place during the War of the Lance. So some of it is kind of weird on how it works. And Dragonlance spans such a huge timeline, all the way from the Age of Might, where, the Knights of Solomnia and the Wizards of High Sorcery and, the King Priest of Ishtar and all this. It was just this golden age of the world where, you can do so much. And then the Cataclysm happens, the Age of Despair happens, and things got much more restricted when it comes to spell casting, when it comes to holy powers like clerics, things like that. The War of the Land starts to open that up, and then finally we kind of come back into a better age, and then like the War of Souls happens, and all this other stuff happens, and things get real messy real quick. So how do we adapt all of that? And when we want to just play in it as a setting, how do we do that right? And that's tough. There is a site, the Dragonlance Nexus. It's a great group of people, hardcore Dragonlance fans. I've been hanging out on those forums for, decades. I don't know how long. I mean, it feels like forever. But there's a lot of other very passionate Dragonlance people there, some of which participated in some of the 3rd edition Dragonlance stuff that Margaret Weiss's publishing put out and things like that. So there's a lot of very knowledgeable Dragonlance people there, and they put together a DM's Guild book called Tasslehoff's Pouches of Everything. And this came out a little while back, and it's been a great book. I think it was a free release, actually. But it was a very, very good book. And they did a lot to tackle 5th edition. And over the past year or two, since whenever it came out, they've caught things and wanted to change things. And just recently, timed well with the release of our official Dragonlance for 5th edition, they released a revised version of this book. And it's really good. They did such an excellent job on it. So if you're looking to play Shadows of the Dragon Queen, and you're not too keen, especially if you're a hardcore Dragonlance fan, and maybe you just want a little bit more depth, a little bit more of that Dragonlance flavor, you need to have this book because it does so much to really, just get that Dragonlance feel. They capture the classes, they capture the Knights of Solomnia really well, and the mages of high sorcery. They capture the races of Kryn. Like the races of Kryn are so unique. Like all we really focused on, it seems, like in the new Dragonlance book, is Kender and kind of Tinker Gnome, but it didn't. They didn't really dive in. Like the Hydra is a huge part of Dragonlance, which is like kind of like ogres, but beautiful ogres. They were like one of the original race of Kryn, at least the original humanoid race of Kryn. And they were corrupted by the Dark Queen, but some of them seem to escape that corruption. They disappeared from the world. It's a whole thing. Like Dragonlance is very rich in its lore, but this book really captures. It feels like almost everything you need and want to play Dragonlance in 5th edition. So let's take a look at the PDF. Let's get into that right now. Okay, so here we are. Let's take a look at the PDF. So here's Tasslehoff's Pouches of Everything revised. So man, it's a big book and there's a lot to go through, but let's take a look at a few things. First off, kind of in the spirit of Volo's guide and Xanathar's guide, Tasslehoff is our guide to this book. We get a little forward from Tasslehoff on his Kender musings. And then it kind of has a little thing about how you want to use this book, what you're going to find within, just a quick breakdown. But what we really want to take note of here is Ancestry of Ansolon here. So we get into the specific of dwarves. Now, a lot of these dwarves are going to fall into player's handbook stuff, but you'll see here that certain dwarves have different ability increases. Now, I want to take note that this book is really written for more 5th edition and not 1D&D. So they don't have the drop your score anywhere you want kind of stuff. Not that you can't do that, right? It's your D&D game, play it how you want. But this definitely gives a little bit more flavor as to what the different races, in this case, the dwarves of Kryn, look like. Because there are a lot of different dwarves. The mountain dwarves are really broken into all these different clans, each with their own unique flavor and abilities. So it kind of breaks that down. We also have something called gully dwarves, which aren't, I don't know if I'd really call them dwarves. They're like these grubby little, not really intelligent, but very resourceful creatures. But you can find them in like ruins and sewers and stuff like that. They're almost like the kobolds of Kryn, in a way. We get into the different elves. Even our high elves, both the Sylvanesti and Quellenesti, have different traits. Even though they're really the same race. Like the Quellenesti left the Sylvanesti, went across the continent, founded their own nation because they had different political beliefs and they wanted to start their own thing. We have the Keganesti, which are more like wood elves. We have the Dragonesti. We've got the the sea elves, our half elves, things like that. Gnomes are very unique in Kryn. They're generally speaking, they're tinkerers. One thing I felt like the book, the Wizard's Coast book didn't catch was the flavor of gnomes. Gnomes talk very fast. It's essentially a run-on sentence. When you read a Dragonlance novel, all the words, there's no spaces. It's just imagine someone talking really fast like this, and then they're telling the whole story, and it just keeps going on and on. That's how a gnome talks. That's what their name is. Their name is essentially their entire life story and their ancestors' life stories going back. It could take a year for a gnome to tell you his full name. So, it gets into a lot more depth on what gnomes are like. And then even humans, there's different, areas, right? This is something that I feel a lot of D&D books lack. Kobold Press's Midgard does a good job of breaking up the human kingdoms and what they're like and things like that. So this does a very good job of telling you about the different human races and human people of Kryn. And of course we have Kender, which I feel like they did a much better job with Kender in this book than the official Wizards of the Coast book. Even covering kind of the thing we saw in the UA that kind of got dropped out, where they made it like a magic ability that they magically find items, where really it's just that Kender don't realize they grab items. They just pick stuff up without even knowing they did it. So you go through your pockets and you find random stuff, and then that stuff is just gone because you lost it. So they capture that really well here too. We talk about Draconians. So there's not Dragonborn in Kryn, but there are Draconians, which are a race of dragons that are born from the good dragon's eggs. The evil dragon stole the good dragon's eggs, and evil wizards and clerics did a ritual that hatched those eggs into these creatures, and they all have kind of different abilities and stuff like that. When draconians die, some of them will turn to stone, locking your weapon in it, or some of them will explode into acid, or stuff like that. So there's all these different things that can happen with the different types of draconians. um we have minotaurs, goblins, half ogres here. We have the Hydra here, the high ogres, very special race. So a lot of stuff that is not captured in the official Wizards of the Coast book. We get into some classes and factions. We do have some cool paths here, mostly centered around dragons. Path of the Dragon Totem, Bard Colleges, Cleric Domains. So some unique stuff, Druid Circles, unique stuff to Kryn. What I want to focus on are the two things that we also see in Wizards of the Coast book, the Knights of Solomnia and the Mages of High Sorcery. So the Knights of Solomnia, it's really a fighter subclass here. Not that others can't be it, and we're going to kind of get into that, but they have a fighter subclass because that's what your default Knight of Solomnia is actually a fighter, not a paladin, though there is an area for paladins in this. So you can see their different levels and their features that they get. And depending on if you go with the Order of the Crown, the Order of the Sword, or the Order of the Rose. So maybe at level 6, you're a Knight of the Sword, and then at level 7, you decide to go, or sorry, you'd be Knight of the Crown, and then at level 7, you go Knight of the Sword. You would then pick up this ability. And you would still retain your old abilities, but you could swap one of them out for one of the others. So I could swap out my level 3 sword ability for my level 7 crown ability, or whatever, or you know what I mean. So you can swap some of the abilities out as you level up. And then similar, we have some monk traditions here. I want to skip over to our wizards, because they do cover sorcerers and they cover warlocks, but again, this is more of a sorcerers you'll see more in the later ages after the War of Souls. There will be sorcerers at other times, but they're generally hunted by the mages of high sorcery. Getting into the wizard traditions, we have our white robe, our red robe, our black robes, and different abilities that you can have within that, right? So what gets neat is when we get into the factions, though. So first off, we have Dark Knights, which are our Knights of Takhisis. And we also have our Solamnic Knights, and we have our mages. Now, the Knights of Takhisis is very similar to the Knights of Solomnia. I'm going to focus on the Solamnic Knights because a lot of you are probably more familiar with them, especially with the Wizards book. But what we have here is these factions. You basically you'd start off, generally speaking, as a Knight of the Sword, though you don't have to. You can start off at other ranks depending on your pedigree, for lack of a better word. But then if you want to move up from, let's say, a Knight of the Crown to a Knight of the Sword, you would have to take on a Knight's Trial. And if you want to move it to a Order of the Rose, you have to do a Quest of Virtue. So there's these different things that you would have to do to move through the ranks, these knightly trials, so to speak. Oh, they also, real quick, they have these ranks. So you actually rank up. So despite what order you're in, you will achieve rank in there, and you'll get different abilities based on those ranks, all the way up to the High Knights. So there's also the Legion of Steel, which doesn't come out till much later in the Dragonlance era, after the War of the Lance, and really even after the Chaos War, called the Legion of Steel, which is more of for lack of a better term, we'll call them neutral knights. But I want to look at the Wizards of High Sorcery, because this is probably one of the best parts of this book. What they do here is you have your orders, and when you join, you kind of pick which order you're planning on being, and that really has to do with your alignment. They talk here again about the tests, very similar to what they did in the Wizards book, which the Wizards book I thought did a good job kind of covering how a test would work. But you generally are going to come out of your test, which generally happens around level 3, with one of your robes based on your alignment. And you could shift. You could shift alignment depending on how you act during your test. But generally, you know what robes you're going to be going in. And then what happens is you get rank and renown within the order. And based on that, you get to learn a secret of your order. So what they'll have here, I'll come back to this in a second. They'll have order secrets. As you rank up, you get to learn, like let's say we're black robes, one of these secrets, and they'll tell you another secret at different points in your mage career. And there's several of them. So depending on what order you're in and how long you've been in it and what you've done, you will learn secrets and basically get special abilities for your robes. Another thing is, and they don't really do this, I don't think, very well in the Wizards book, but probably because it's a complicated mechanic. And they do say in here, if you don't want to do this, don't do it. But I think it's important in Dragonlance. The moons are the gods of magic. And though it's not like a clerical magic, the moons do grant the wizards their magic. That's where magic comes from, is the moon. And so depending on where the moon is in its cycle, you have more or less power. So if you're a white robe wizard and the white moon is full, you get bonuses to your abilities. You get like whatever it is here. I think it's a +1 to attack and extra bonus on your DCs and stuff like that for people to make a DC check against you. And then if all 3 moons are full, everybody gets a bonus. If the moons are all low, meaning moon out, you actually get a minus to some of your stuff. So we look here at low sanction. You have -1 to -1 bonus to spell, save, DC, and attacks. When they're at quarter moons, there's no bonus. Low sanction 2 moons align, no bonus. High sanction, so your moon is at high sanction, you get +1 bonus. Low sanction, meaning that no moon, but they're all on low sanction together, you actually get a +1 bonus. High sanction, your moon plus one other moon gets a +2. It has to be your moon plus one other. I know it says 2 moons, but they mean your moon plus one other moon. You get a +2. And the Night of the Eye is when all 3 moons are in high sanction. The white moon being the biggest, the red moon being in the middle, and then the black moon looking like an iris. Everybody gets a +3. And generally speaking, only black robe wizards can see the black moon. Nobody else is able to see it. But everybody can see it that night, and it looks like an eyeball in the sky. So you get all these cool abilities, right? And the other thing to note here, let me zoom back out a little, but the other thing to note here is that when we look at the chart, you'll see that the black moon has a much shorter cycle. It has an 8-day cycle, where the red moon's is longer, the white moon's even longer. So the white moon will stay in high sanction longer, because it's right here. This is full moon. It kind of lasts for this many days. Where the black moon will only go for 2 days, but it happens more often. So it kind of is this balance of less often but longer versus more often but less time. So very good job they did here with magic. We get into some backgrounds and feats here as well. I won't go too depth in these, but again, very, very nice job on some of these backgrounds specific to Krynn. And then, we have some weapons that are going to be very specific to our Dragonlance flavor here. I'll come down so you can kind of get a look here, and you can see, obviously we have our hoot packs and things like that, but some new weapons that you might find in Dragonlance, including some blunderbusses and stuff like that. We do have a whole section here on the gods of Krynn, which is very important. The gods play a huge role in Krynn, so this is a very good section to have. And then they do go into some of the ambient magic, because once the gods had to leave Krynn, ambient magic is how sorcerers and other, people, and even the wizards ended up getting powers. They found the magic within themselves, and they were able to develop new ways of magic. We do have our magic items, many of which are famous magic items. You will see some of these in the Dragonlance book, from Wizards of the Coast. I think that they're better done in here. I know I covered another Dragonlance book a couple weeks ago. I would say compare. Some of them are different. Generally, they're very similar because they're being taken from older versions of the weapons from previous editions and kind of updated. So everybody has their own twist on it. But I think that both books do a very good job of capturing these magic items. So pick and choose which ones you like the best. And then, of course, we've got stat blocks. We have NPC blocks for those draconians and stuff like that here, as well as some other creatures that will be unique to Krynn. We do have the River of Time, which, if you want to know the history of Krynn, this is it. This is a very good 5th edition adaptation of a 2nd edition box set Dragonlance book that was done, way back in the day. And then we do have the geography, so we get all of our maps and locations and stuff like that. And then a full map of Ansolon, by the way. Very, very good job. If you are a Dragonlance fan, if you're looking to play in the Dragonlance setting in 5th edition, this book's a must-have. It absolutely is phenomenally done. People who know the world, who love Dragonlance, who wanted to capture the feeling of Dragonlance, made this book. So I know this was a bit of a longer video than normal, but there was no way around it. There was a lot to capture in this book. So I apologize for the longer than normal video, but I don't apologize because this book is fantastic and everybody that is a Dragonlance fan needs to have it. And I could not recommend it more if I wanted to, because it is just wonderfully, wonderfully done. So good job to all the writers that participated in creating this book. Thank you so much for doing it, because as a diehard Dragonlance fan, I absolutely love it. So that's it for now. I will have description below to where you can pick this book up in the DMs Guild. Make sure you grab it, because yeah, awesome book. All right, that's it for today, guys. And until next time, roll those dice.